Alright boys, here we go. 2019 Little Brown Jug Enduro in Buffalo, South Carolina. Little Brown Jug is always the Little Brown Jug. It's the same course, but I think they turned around some of the sections. We didn't run them all in the same order, except for I think Test 5 was the same as last year because we ended up doing the same really tight section in the end. And I know Test 1, at least the beginning, was the same as it was last year. It's not a bad thing. It's cool to come home and race in the stuff that I know. This race was really close to me, like an hour from my house. It's a fun kind of home court advantage thing we get to do instead of being, far away from home trying to adapt to new conditions that we've never ridden in. And while rocks are rocks, everywhere's laid out different. Everybody cuts trail different. I've grown up in this area riding and racing, so I know what to expect here. And it's nice to have a race where you don't have any real, you don't have any surprises. You're already adapted to the situation. You can just kind of ride your race. I shared a row with Keith, Patrick, me, Josh, and Nick, and that ended up being the pecking order for the day. It was cool having a faster guy in front of me because it could really, set the tone for how fast I felt like I needed to go. Because for the first, mile or two of each test, I could keep him in sight, and then he'd walk away. But that was just a good setting point for where I needed to be. I think that, along with the home court advantage thing, really helped me finish where I did, which is I ended up first in 30B. And it's cool to replace my Jug from last year, which was a second place finish in 30C, with this new bigger one with the big first place on it. Temperature was hot. Course conditions were really good, except for some dust in the wide open, sun-baked field sections, and then all the lower, down by the creek sections were what you'd expect, just that kind of black, loamy, tacky dirt that's really fun to ride in. And this is just a no surprises race for me. It was pretty long. I think we ended up doing like 55 or almost 60 miles with all the connectors. I kind of wish they had cut the times down a little bit but the time between tests was kind of long, so you had all this cooldown, which is good for stamina and keeping you from getting fatigued, but it makes for a long day. Like, it feels like it could have been a little shorter of a full day if we were able to have a 20 minutes between tests instead of 30 like we did for some of them. The club that cut the trails did a really good job. It's the same trail as last year, but them being able to go out and reflag everything, they did a really, really good job, except for in a couple spots where we had some really big hiccups. One of them was my fault. It was like I just undercut a banner kind of thing. The same thing I did in Ohio. Just not paying attention, just kind of blow through a banner, and then you end up having to turn around and correct. But the big one that happened in Test 3 actually resulted in Test 3 being thrown out because of a contest at the finish. People said, there were some people that were dropping these insanely low times, like beating Grant Baylor, who overalled this whole thing, beating Grant Baylor by a minute or two or even more out of the test, which is unheard of. And so they ended up dropping Test 3 because of how big of a cut these were making. And for reference, I cut I dropped an 18 on Test 3, and there were some C riders that were dropping 8s, which is 10 minutes faster than me, which is, I know there's fast guys, but that's kind of insane. This was you can see how dry it is here, see how much dust there can be. It was kind of cool because you could tell where people were because of the dust, so you'd be coming through some of these clear-cut sections, these brush sections, and you could see little wisps of dust, and you'd know, okay, pick it up because there's somebody in front of you, and just treat everybody like somebody you gotta pass, and you end up making up time, which is kind of my tactic for these things, is you just find somebody and pass them, or at least try to, or piggyback off of how fast they're going, stick with them the whole race. I'd corrected my steering stem issue, so my steering wasn't a problem this race, and I was able to get into the right mindset beforehand and really, hammer for this whole race. I felt really good all day. I got home after this race, and my average for my oil on my bike is about 6 hours, and that's the point where I tend to be changing my oil. And actually, this race before it, I had contemplated changing it because I had one hair scramble and one enduro on my oil change, and then didn't change it for this. I figured it'd be okay for one more ride, and I'll change it after. I get home and change my oil, and there's a big chunk of fiber material that looks like clutch material in my oil. While not being super excited about that, I pulled it open and found that my EXP ring in my Recluse had snapped in half on both sides. Just completely destroyed the thing. And I'm pretty sure that happened in Ohio, and I ran that whole race with a broken EXP ring, or at least the last test of that race with a broken EXP ring, and ran this whole race with a broken EXP ring, and seemingly didn't hurt my bike. I hope I don't jinx myself, but I'm back on my OEM manual clutch, and we'll see how we do in Missouri with that one, because I've been so used to the Recluse lately. Hopefully I can get back to using the manual and get myself comfortable again on it. This is the start of test 3. You can see how fast the course is, and it just, even being tight, it was a fast course. It felt like there wasn't a lot of places where you were really crawling around. It was bar tight, but it wasn't, scary bar tight. There's a difference between that kind of no flow, just really tight kind of trail and what this was. Something I still got to work on is hotlining. After I go back and watch all my videos, I see where I could have made, just a fraction of a second up by picking a straighter line than what I ended up hitting, and those add up over time. And not like I'm chasing this series, but it's still cool to see where you can make up time and use these videos as that kind of like, not training, but something that I can look back on and be like, okay, well, here's where I made an improvement, here's where I could have done something better. And seeing yourself grow as a rider is always fun, and it makes for you start seeing better finishes when you start implementing the things that you're telling yourself you need to do and actually acting on it. Like in this video, the thing I understand is that I hesitate more than the guys that are faster than me. I see an obstacle and I don't immediately make that reaction I need to make as quick as I need to make it, and it costs me just fractions of a second, or somewhere where I'm not holding the throttle wide open enough or long enough, or somewhere where I'm not on the brakes hard enough, fast enough, and that kind of stuff is just where I'm trying to progress as a rider, and all of this racing really helps me with that. It's amazing how much you miss your home woods when you're traveling to race. It's cool to see all these other places, and like I said, I really enjoyed Pennsylvania woods. I thought they were probably some of the most fun I've ridden in a long time, but there's something about coming home and being in the just South Carolina pine forest that makes it it gives you a good feeling for how you ride. The wide open field section is something I never would have done before. This is one of those growth things. I've just gotten better at letting my bike wind out a little bit in those open fields. This is one of the things, so they did a really good job marking the trail, but in some of the places there were things like that. So there's like, I've always been under the idea that if you have, so a straight arrow means you're going straight. A, slightly, a 90-degree arrow means you're turning, ahead. A down-facing arrow when you're going into the trail means turn right now. And that's what that looked like to me, and why I slammed on the brakes so hard is because I was seeing that arrow as, here's the turn right now. And why they angled them so aggressively like that far back from the actual turn, I don't understand. I kind of wish there was a convention for that to say, okay, here's how you're going to put these arrows almost like a rally course, you know, where they have more arrows mean more aggressive turning, so it's a way you can know without having to, and you don't have to guess at how the trail is going to read out. You can just kind of hammer into it, and by reading the arrows appropriately, you know what you're getting into. So it's always kind of hard for me to transition into different riding terrains. So sand rides completely different than, you know, hard pack or even silt. You have to be really ginger with your front brake, and it's a lot of power, and, you know, driving with the rear in sand, and to go from hard pack mud essentially to sand always kind of throws me off. I adapt pretty quick because I like riding sand, but it's still just something you got to be aware of in these things, is that you go from riding one kind of terrain immediately into riding a totally different kind. You just got to be on your game about when you jump into those new sections that you're just, you know, ready for it. And then it's immediately back into what it was before, just hard, tight pine woods. Alright, so this is the section of section 3 where everybody got screwed up. And then once going back and watching the video, I can tell you what happened, and I'm going to pause it and I'll show you where the arrows are and what I think should have happened. So right there on the right are the 2 arrows indicating that you need to turn left here. And then the little white square on the left hand side is the arrow showing you that you need to drive into a trail that looks like it's been logged. I didn't see it. I went past that, and then the guy in front of me went past that, the guy in front of him went past that. Josh behind me went past that, and 2, I think, A-riders went by me in here. There's a guy who passes me who's just super committed to doing what he's doing. And this looks like trail, I just don't see any arrows. And it takes me a minute and like 4 seconds to get back for me to realize that something's going wrong and turning around, trying to go back and find the trail. So I'm still racing, you know, trying to, you know, keep moving. I think this guy's already keyed into that we're going the wrong direction. And this just looks like trail. It just looks like there's no arrows. You're like, well, why does it look like this? It looks freshly ridden. And then up ahead is when I start noticing, oh, this feels wrong. And there's a guy behind me. I'm slowing down because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And there's a guy behind me who comes ripping past. This guy's all committed to just keeping going this way regardless of what the actual plan is. And then that's up here is where I turn around and I see the arrow going the other direction. I'm like, oh shit, I'm going the wrong way. At some point up ahead, at that point I showed you where the arrows turned around, that's where we needed to go back and keep going the right direction. So I turned around and got back on the trail. This is a little later on. This is another one of those arrow issues that I saw. So that guy, I hadn't been passed by anybody all day long, and even after this test I wasn't passed by anybody. That guy was way too fast to be going like that, and then I don't know what the fuck that was. I just decides that I'm coming along and he's going in the other direction. He's just going to cut in front of me. I just happened to see this opening in the trail and see the arrow on the ground. So the guy who cut in front of me, who was also the same like really fast guy that went by me a little bit ago, is now behind me. And it's like he made the same mistake, and I know he's trying to catch up, but that's what I'm talking about with how there are a couple sections, and that's what happened in test 3 to make it so there were people that accidentally cut the trail. And I think it was just that poor marking of a big turn. You know, somebody should have been out there with tape and making that very visible that was a turn, not something where it's like, oh well, here's a vague arrow and then a non-visible arrow on the left when you're going past this at speed. And I think that was the point where everybody was making these big mistakes and they were cutting out big sections of the trail. And I say that and we didn't really have many other instances of that where people were really cutting trail real bad. Yeah, there's always spots where people blow through lines, and you know, people. I did it too, or somebody just cut track weird, but you don't miss the track. You know, there has to be a big arrowing, directional snafu that happens to really screw it up like that, where we have to throw a whole test out because of how badly people were cutting the trail and, you know, cutting people's times in half essentially for what the distance of the trail was. And I think this is test 3 is the longest test of the day. It was like 15 miles long. Be able to drop an 8 in an enduro on a 15-mile test when the, you know, overall pro guy dropped a 9 is insane. So overall, it was a really good day. The weather could have been a little better, it could have been a little cooler, but I mean, it was just killer, even just being an extra race. Next one is NEPG in Missouri, the Lead Belt. We'll see you there. Peace.